My earliest memory of that clown dates back to my cousin Jake's 10th birthday bash. I was just 5 years old, but I still vividly recall the buzz around the clown. My parents prepped me about it before we even left our house and on the car ride there. "Dude, there's gonna be a clown at Jake's party," my dad said. "Just be chill, all you gotta do is be cool," my mom chimed in. I couldn't quite grasp why they were so worked up, why my mom was fidgeting with her dress the whole way, or why my dad was huffing like a marathon runner. I mean, clowns were supposed to rock at birthday parties, right? So we rolled up to Jake's crib and something seemed off. Kids were tearing up the backyard, bouncing in the bouncy castle. But the adults were acting strange, huddled together, eyes darting around, with some of my aunts and uncles doing the door in and out dance. It was like they were waiting for the apocalypse or something. While I was bouncing in the castle with my cousins, I caught a movement in the bushes near the gate leading to the backyard. I kept bouncing, hoping to catch a better glimpse of whatever the heck was lurking. Finally, the clown appeared, peeking out from the shrubs, then casually strolled over to the gate. I paused mid-bounce, trying to steady myself, watching the clown step into the yard and gently shut the gate behind him. I shoved my fingers through the mesh in the castle and pressed my face against it, gawking as he sized up the yard until he locked eyes with me. We had a weird staring contest. I didn't have a clue what to do. Everyone else was clueless, still bouncing behind me. This clown was pint-sized, sported a wild, rainbow-colored wig. His face was ghostly white, like he came from the moon or something. No paint vibes whatsoever. He had regular-sized lips, but they were fire truck red, and that bulbous red nose. Epic. His eyes were dark as a black hole. I couldn't even tell where the pupils started. He had these black lines coming down from his brows that ended on his cheeks, making his cheeks look all blown up like balloons, blush and all. Skin smoother than a baby's butt. The dude rocked yellow polka dot pants held up by snazzy red suspenders. His shirt? White with giant red buttons, and he was flaunting red ruffles on his neck, chest, and sleeves. Shiny red clown shoes on his feet, and he was chilling with a gift bag in one hand. I don't know how long I zoned out staring at him. Suddenly my mom yanked me out of the castle like a superhero's sidekick. She dragged me over to a table, plunking me between her and my dad. I still watched the clown as he cruised over to my cousin Lisa, pulled out a pink balloon from his pants, blew it up, twisted it into a frickin' dog, then handed it to her. She took it, sprinted to my Aunt Chelsea, Lisa's mom, who practically snatched her away from the clown like she was rescuing her from quicksand. The rest of Jake's party felt like a standoff in a spaghetti western. Our parents acted like paparazzi guards, making sure we didn't roam too far. The clown just roamed, dishing out balloon animals and nose honks to the kids. When present time hit, we watched Jake unravel what felt like a billion video games and action figures. When he finally unwrapped the last family present, the clown sidled over and handed Jake his own gift bag. Jake's mom and dad flipped out. His mom tried to veto the clown's handoff, while his dad held her back like a bouncer. We all stared as Jake thanked the clown. Then the clown wandered off, hopped the fence, and disappeared. Jake's dad swiped the book from him. I quizzed Jake later, but he said his folks tossed it. After that, I spotted the clown at other cousins' 10th bashes. Every time, same outfit, same hardcover picture book, and every time the parents nixed the book pronto. By the time I hit 10, same script played out. Clown, book, parents intercepting it. The night of my party, I caught my dad sneaking up to the attic with my book. I snooped around afterward, but that thing was on a ninja-level hide-and-seek mission. One time, I dared ask my parents why we even bothered with parties if they were terrified of the clown. They just shrugged it off, said the clown would show no matter what, like it was omnipresent or some crap. A few years passed, clownless. Cousins all hit the big double digits, no kids on the horizon. When I turned 20, my parents kicked the bucket in a car crash, handing me their house keys like it was a macabre game of Monopoly. By then, the clown and his twisted gifts were the last thing on my mind. I couldn't care less about the book or the cursed clown circus. Then, 12 years later, my daughter Wendy hit the big 1-0. My wife and I were clued in on the clown's act, had seen it pull this stunt at Jake's twins' bash. We prepped Wendy, passed down the same warnings like a cursed family heirloom. Be nice, Wendy. About half hour into the party, guess who crashes the backyard? Mr. Clown himself. I held back the urge to rush and shut this down. He looked exactly as I remembered. Not a wiggle or wig change in sight. I watched him lock eyes with my niece Alice, fish a blue balloon from his pants, inflate it, and repeat the act with another blue one, sculpting them into a hat perched on her head. Alice thanked him. He applauded. Then he wandered on. Nobody tried stopping him, because we were all raised to fear the consequences, even if the specifics were sketchy as heck. We didn't want to find out what would pop. Gift time came, and I eyed the book in Clowny's mitts. After Wendy did the gift unwrap marathon, the clown strolled up, handed her the bag. She pulled the book out, thanked the clown, and watched as he bounded over the fence out of sight. I breathed easy once he vamoosed, glued to Wendy's side. The screaming started later, a horror movie soundtrack we couldn't unhear. Cousins, uncles, aunts. Screams were an encore. The police arrived, then Jake, the whole circus of panic. Wendy made it back, told us she jumped the fence to escape. Cops asked questions, but we played dumb about the clown. No way they'd believe the curse angle. Hours later, party extinguished, I helped my wife clean. Then I handed her the book, told her to read it. She did, and her reaction wasn't pretty. What the heck is this? Is this some kind of sick joke? I was equally clueless. Did the same thing happen to others? No clue. Our folks never let us see the books, I confessed. She shuddered, handed the book back, clearly disgusted. I'm gonna go check something, I muttered. Attic, where treasures turn into cobweb relics. I dug through boxes like a treasure hunter. Found the damn thing. My cursed 10th birthday book, hidden under old junk. My wife read it. Happy 10th David engraved inside. After she was done, I told her to grab the book she just read. What's this? Read it. I scurried to the attic entrance, flicked on the light, listened to it squeak, then pulled down the ladder. Up I went, rummaging through history till I held it, my old book. Turns out the story repeated itself, just with my name, Wendy's party, and the clown's encore. It mentioned the kids having fun, families being spared. The book clued me in on how messed up this whole thing was. Wendy, I yelled, racing downstairs. My wife demanded answers, but I rushed past into Wendy's room. She was gone, bed empty, window wide open. The chill slithered down my spine. Something was deeply off. I used to work restocking shelves at a grocery store. It wasn't too bad, but occasionally you'd run into some annoying customers. I enjoy helping people, but it's frustrating when someone insists you have an item in stock when you don't, or when they get angry at you for something unrelated. However, the weirdest encounter I had with a customer made me quit my job. It made me feel uneasy around people. It was a regular day. Nothing indicated that it would be different from any other routine shift. I was halfway through my shift, in that phase where it's not quite time to leave but not early either. I was in a quiet corner, restocking a shelf with discounted soup. Behind me was a section for miscellaneous items like kitchen tools, pool toys, and seasonal stuff. A guy with a clean-shaven face and a buzz cut approached me asking where the ketchup was. He was tall and had a square jaw, giving off a friendly yet rough vibe. He seemed like an average person, maybe a dad type. His blue eyes suggested he had a knack for cracking crude jokes. My initial impression of him turned out to be crucial, given what unfolded later. I snapped back to reality to respond, "It's in aisle 15. He winked and gave a thumbs up, saying, "Thanks, buddy, you're a lifesaver." I smiled and returned to my task, noticing him heading towards aisle 15. A few minutes later, while I was stocking another box of soup, I saw the same guy nearby looking down at me with an odd expression. Maybe embarrassment? Then he smiled and asked again, "Where's the ketchup, buddy?" I blinked, wondering if he forgot or couldn't find it. I pointed to aisle 15 and replied, "Aisle 15. He winked once more, giving the same thanks before heading to that aisle. I chuckled, thinking it was just a harmless interaction, but he stopped before turning the corner and looked at me, his expression slightly annoyed. I realized he might have misinterpreted my laughter. He walked off, and I thought he was taking it in stride. A minute later, I spotted him at the checkout with a girl, presumably his wife. A few minutes after that, I finished stocking the shelf and went to retrieve more items. As I turned the corner, I saw the same guy standing there looking lost. He locked eyes with me and recognition flickered in his gaze. He wasn't holding anything or pushing a cart. "Didn't find the ketchup?" I asked politely. He smiled, nodded, and repeated, "Where's the ketchup, buddy?" A laugh involuntarily escaped me. I felt like he was playing a prank, but his demeanor seemed different this time. Maybe he genuinely couldn't find it. I guided him towards the ketchup, and he followed me shyly, unlike his previous confident attitude. He stood awkwardly near the ketchup shelf, as if uncertain why he was there. I pointed to the bottles, and he stared as if he couldn't comprehend. I tried to make the situation less uncomfortable, but his behavior puzzled me. He suddenly seemed so different from before. With a sense of relief, he thanked me and repeated his catchphrase, "Thanks, buddy, you're a lifesaver." I chuckled awkwardly, thinking it was all in good fun. As I walked away, he seemed content next to the ketchup. Later, I was tasked with bringing a pallet of toilet paper to the general merchandise area. As I passed through the doors, someone laughed next to me. I thought it was my manager, Greg, but it wasn't. It was the ketchup guy, mimicking Greg's laugh and voice. He told me to bring a pallet to the general merchandise area in a mocking tone. Perplexed, I thought he might know Greg, or was playing a joke. But his laughter and imitation didn't seem ordinary. He then asked me about the washroom in the voice of another customer. The situation was becoming strange. As I continued my work, he approached again, repeating the same questions in different voices. His behavior seemed erratic, and I started feeling uneasy. His attempts at mimicking voices were disturbingly accurate, as if he was echoing them perfectly. Things escalated when he mimicked an old lady's voice and actions. His imitation of the air conditioner noise sent shivers down my spine. His face contorted as he seemed to struggle with something within him. The situation was incomprehensible, and I watched in shock. He suddenly turned to me, saying "please" in my voice. I gasped, and his reaction intensified. He rushed away, leaving me utterly bewildered. I didn't know what to do, but Greg and security confronted him. He repeated their words, mimicking them perfectly. It culminated in a chilling scene where he seemed to convulse while mimicking an announcement. He fled the store, leaving a sense of unease behind. I couldn't explain his behavior and felt a mixture of fear and confusion. I quit my job and have been avoiding similar encounters ever since. The incident left me questioning reality and human behavior. For the sake of maintaining my privacy, let's go with the name Howard for me. This whole incident dates back a few years, specifically around late 2018, when I was around 13 years old. The story unfolds during a weekend when my mother, stepdad, grandmother, and I decided to spend some quality time together at my mom's friend's house. This particular house was situated about a mile away from the coast of Lake Huron, up in the northern parts of Michigan. Now, I'm about to dive into some pretty nerve-wracking details, so bear with me. The anticipation leading up to this trip had me on edge. You see, my mom had mentioned that the house was in a heavily forested area, and this triggered my fear of wolves and bears that are known to inhabit these woods. Although I've got nothing against forests, I've always been somewhat uneasy about the critters that reside within them. I kept voicing my concerns to my family, persistently saying things like, "I'm not really up for this, you know. There might be something lurking in those woods." And every time, either my mom or my stepdad would try to ease my worries by saying things like, "Don't worry, we've got your back and there's strength in numbers." Or, with so many of us, no creature would dare to mess with us. It was somewhat comforting, given that there were going to be 7 of us, including me at the house. Our journey commenced at around 5 p.m., leaving our home in the southern parts of Michigan, and by 8 p.m., we had arrived at our destination. The house itself was nestled on the outskirts of Bay City, right by the lake. Upon reaching the place, my initial fear rekindled, seeing the house amidst an expansive clearing, encompassed by miles and miles of forest on all sides. This sight sent shivers down my spine, but I chose to ignore my apprehensions. Meeting my mom's friends helped to take my mind off the woods. We indulged in some local pizza, and before I knew it, I was engrossed in YouTube videos on my phone while everyone else was having a blast downstairs in the basement, enjoying the pool table and a big TV. Around 11 p.m., while engrossed in my videos, a peculiar sound caught my attention. It seemed to be coming from the exterior wall opposite to where I was sitting, separated by a good 10 feet. Now, for context, the main floor of the house was elevated about 5 feet off the ground, with a small porch accessible through stairs. This sound I was hearing seemed like multiple sharp objects scraping against the wall. I was too unnerved to actually look in that direction. However, the noise eventually ceased, and I could make out movement in the backyard. As it turned out, the source of this eerie sound was nothing but a deer. The relief was instant. Deer have always symbolized peace and tranquility, and this sighting put me at ease. My mom noticed I still appeared perturbed and inquired about it. I confessed that I heard scraping outside, but that it was just a deer. She chuckled and shared how she had also been startled by the sound of deer antlers scraping on things. Afterward, as everyone was getting ready to sleep, I made myself comfortable on the couch in the living room, cocooned in my Jurassic World blanket. Surprisingly, I managed to sleep fairly well despite my lingering unease. The next morning, my mom's friend, whom I'll refer to as Carissa for privacy's sake, roused me from slumber with a cheerful, "Hey Howard, rise and shine, it's a bright morning." I got up rather promptly, my cautious nature still very much intact. Checking my phone, I discovered it was a whopping 2 p.m. I had apparently overslept. Stepping outside, I was greeted by their adorable husky named Blitz. This dog was a bundle of energy, and we played together for a solid 2 hours. Blitz had a thing for fetching a soccer ball, so I kept him entertained for a while. Later, we all headed to the lake, a group of 10 people in total. I wasn't particularly thrilled about socializing, but my mom had other plans for me. Then came the moment I dreaded most. Upon reaching the beach, I realized that Carissa's friends had brought along their own set of friends, and among them were kids. Now, I have to admit I'm not the biggest fan of kids, especially the young ones. There were 3 of them, aged around 6 or so. I'm terrible with estimating ages. My cousin back in my home state, Tennessee, was younger than me, so I knew what little kids were like, and they tended to annoy me to no end. Armed with my phone, I took refuge just beyond the tree line, keeping the woods within my sight. Surprisingly, this particular patch of forest seemed quite manageable. It was well lit, and the presence of numerous people around made it feel secure. With my trusty YouTube again, I spent about an hour and a half in solitude, blissfully ignorant of what was about to unfold. Vividly, I remember the details of that moment. I was chuckling softly at a video of the Hodgetwins reading an email from a guy pondering whether he should get back with his ex-girlfriend. Then the laughter was abruptly choked out by a more sinister noise emerging from deeper within the forest. This noise bore a striking resemblance to my grandmother's voice, but it felt wrong, off somehow. It was as if she were calling out to me from a distance of a few hundred feet. Instinctively, I started getting up to investigate when I stopped myself in my tracks. A realization struck me. The voice I was hearing couldn't possibly be my grandmother's. She was sitting right there on the beach, clearly visible in the opposite direction of the eerie voice. The sound seemed distorted, as if my grandmother were out of breath. The words that faintly reached my ear sounded something like, "Howard, come here, boy." It was a phrase she often used when she needed my attention, referring to me as boy. Something was very wrong, and I quickly abandoned any notion of exploring the woods. Instead, I hurried back to my grandmother and took a seat beside her. I recounted what had transpired, explaining how I'd heard someone calling me from the woods with a voice eerily similar to hers, as if she were out of breath. To my utter surprise, both my mom and my grandmother exchanged perplexed glances. My mom asked if the voice resembled hers, and upon hearing my confirmation, they both brushed off my claims. They insisted I was either making it up or trying to find excuses to leave the beach, which left me puzzled. I persisted, standing my ground for the next 5 minutes, but they remained unconvinced. For some inexplicable reason, they seemed resolute in dismissing my account. I knew what I had heard, though, and I remained steadfast in my conviction. For the remainder of our time at the beach, I stayed by their side, unwilling to let my guard down. An hour later, we decided to head back to the house. Carissa's friends, the couple with the 3 kids, joined us, with 5 of us piling into one vehicle and the others in a different one. The night had fully descended, although not completely pitch black, still requiring a source of light to see clearly. For the duration of the drive, we were flanked by dense woods, with the tree line a mere 6 feet away on either side of the van. During this stretch, I could have sworn that I saw a dark figure dashing alongside us just beyond the cover of the trees. I quickly brushed it off as a mere figment of my imagination, a trick played by my mind. Our journey from the beach to the house took around 5 minutes. Upon our arrival, the kids dashed into the house, their energetic presence filling the air with noise and excitement. I waited for my mom to head inside first before I followed, aiming to minimize my interaction with the kids. Soon after, the parents of these energetic youngsters suggested that I join them in play, given that I was a kid too. Admittedly, I wasn't quite sure how to handle the situation, so they shepherded me outside along with the 3 youngsters. It was then revealed that we could all have some fun with Blitz, the husky. Taking a step toward the dog, flanked by the kids, I crouched down and began petting Blitz, who seemed to enjoy the attention. He rolled onto his side, a silent request for belly rubs, which I duly provided. In the midst of this, a sudden and unexpected event occurred. One of the kids labeled Blitz as a stupid dog and kicked him rather forcefully. The dog responded with an angered bark and attempted to lunge at the kid. Acting swiftly, I managed to grab Blitz's collar, preventing any further escalation. Carissa promptly intervened to calm the dog down while the kid who'd instigated the incident was left in tears. Seeking an explanation, my mom inquired about the situation, and I recounted the event as it unfolded. I made it clear that the kid's actions were unwarranted and that Blitz's reaction was justifiable. My mom seemed to agree with my assessment, highlighting that hurting animals was a definite no-no. With the confrontation resolved, I continued to offer comfort to Blitz, praising him for standing up for himself against the mistreatment he had endured. Suddenly, the atmosphere was altered by a distant sound, the snap of a branch or twig, originating from the woods about 100 yards away. It wasn't a mere snap, though. It resembled more the crushing of a hefty branch underfoot. The sound captured my attention immediately, and as if Blitz was telepathically connected to my sense of alertness, he sprang to attention. Sniffing the air and growling, his fur stood on end, lending him an almost cartoonish appearance. Instinctively, he pressed himself closer to my side, clearly positioning himself as my protector against whatever unseen threat lurked out there. His barks took on a more aggressive tone this time, emanating from a place of primal fury. Paralyzed by both fear and intrigue, I stood there, squinting into the darkness, attempting to discern any sign of movement. My heart pounded so fiercely that I was certain it would burst from my chest. And then, without warning, Blitz bolted into the woods, breaking free from his tie-out stake. Panic flooded me, and I rushed inside, urgently informing everyone that Blitz had dashed into the forest in pursuit of something. Carissa's husband, whom I'll refer to as Steve, and my stepdad sprang into action, each retrieving their weapons. An intimidating rifle from Steve, and a pistol from my stepdad. Their athletic builds bolstered my hopes that they'd be more than capable of handling whatever situation had unfolded. With weapons in hand, they dashed into the woods, their determined strides devouring the distance. Both Steve and my stepdad were in peak physical condition, and I held tight to the belief that they could confront and conquer any threat. As I joined the others, we dimmed the lights in the house, opening a window that overlooked the woods they had just ventured into. We waited with bated breath, straining our senses to detect any sign of their return. The minutes stretched on, but no sign of them emerged. 10 minutes, then 20, still nothing. Tension mounted as time ticked away, and anxiety gripped us all. Still, we remained vigilant, resisting the temptation to venture outside. It must have been hours, an eternity it felt like, but they didn't return. The decision was ultimately made to retire for the night, the impending darkness only deepening our worries. It was with heavy hearts that we settled into our respective sleeping quarters, aware that their fate hung in the balance. As I made my makeshift bed on the couch once again, I ensured the curtains were drawn closed. Sleep eluded me for around 20 minutes, so I decided to listen to some calming ASMR to help soothe my nerves. The subsequent morning dawned early, and I checked my phone, noting that it was already 9 a.m. Sunlight filtered in through the cracks in the curtains, illuminating the room. My mind and body remained on high alert, a result of the previous day's unsettling events. I stretched and ventured toward the back porch, throwing open the curtains with a mixture of hope and trepidation. However, what met my eyes was a vision of pure horror, something that will forever haunt my memory. Before me stood the remnants of Steve and my stepdad, or what was left of them. The previous night's creature, the entity that had inflicted such unfathomable violence, had reduced them to a gruesome display of carnage. The scene before me was beyond recognition. Flesh torn, insides strewn about, limbs missing. The visceral shock of it all caused me to involuntarily exclaim, "What the hell?" The exclamation echoed through the house, summoning the others in a panicked rush. Their footsteps, a stampede of worry and distress, reached my ears, and as they beheld the ghastly tableau, a collective wave of screams and tears ensued. My mom and Carissa immediately rushed to their sides, while the kids were hurriedly shielded from the ghastly scene by their mother, her husband calling 911 to summon help. In the midst of our anguish, the police arrived, greeted by a gruesome scene that even managed to elicit a physical reaction from them. It was clear that this situation required more than their usual expertise, and the chief, along with medical professionals, were summoned to handle the tragic remains. My mom and Carissa remained by the side of the fallen, their grief beyond words as they clung to their loved ones. Paramedics soon took charge, their solemn presence juxtaposed against the horror that had played out before us. The police officers lingered on, querying us about the events that had transpired. My own interrogation followed, my young age seemingly softening their tone. They inquired about the discovery of the bodies, the events of the previous night, and whether any unusual sounds or occurrences had been noted. I obliged with the truth, offering up my account as accurately as possible. With their questions answered, they departed, leaving us to grapple with the residual shock. Hours passed in a haze of sorrow and disbelief. Our dwelling turned into a chilling tableau of grief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we retreated to our beds with a sense of apprehension, each creak of the house echoing with an unnerving reminder of the horror we had witnessed. My own paranoia had escalated exponentially, every sound reverberating with the potential for danger. At around 3 a.m., the scrape of antlers against the exterior wall reached my ears once again, a callback to the deer from the previous night. This time, however, the sound seemed to originate directly on the other side of the wall. An icy shiver raced down my spine, my heart pounding as I connected the dots. The deer had returned, its antlers brushing against the wall, but this time the origin was from the floor level, a chilling revelation that defied all rational explanation. Despite my fear, I forced myself to stay put, straining my ears to ascertain when the sound would cease. And cease it did, but I was left rooted to the spot, unable to move. The realization that the sound was inexplicably originating from a higher elevation than the previous night shattered any semblance of composure I had managed to cling to. I crept toward the back door, cautiously peering through the curtains, a mere sliver to prevent discovery. Fortunately, the backyard was well illuminated by the lights that adorned the tool shed and the deck railing. The moon, too, cast its revealing light upon the scene. What I witnessed, however, defied any semblance of normalcy or sanity. A creature, resembling a deer in some respects but more akin in size to a moose, stood there. Its antlers were massive, larger than any cervid should possess, jutting out menacingly. A maw filled with razor-sharp teeth was partially open, exuding an air of ominous threat. What was most jarring was its sheer size, a quadrupedal stance that did little to detract from its imposing stature, nearly 7 feet tall at the shoulder. But then, a horrifying transformation occurred. The creature stood upright on its hind legs, towering at an astounding 12 feet. It was a nightmare-given form, emaciated and grotesque, with a skeletal head devoid of flesh. Its matted fur, colored a dark brown verging on black, lined its back, hinting at its malicious presence. A repulsive stench accompanied the creature, a pungent mixture of decay and filth that seemed to cling to the air. I was paralyzed by fear, unable to tear my eyes from this abominable sight. Then, to my astonishment and terror, the creature's attention seemed to fix upon me. It was as if it could see through the very fabric of my being, locking onto me with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. I became acutely aware of its intention, of its malice. It wanted something from me. A mix of revulsion and dread welled up as I recognized that the creature's extended hand beckoned me, an eerie invitation that I dared not accept. Refusing to succumb to its apparent desire, I remained frozen, my heart racing as I locked eyes with this nightmare incarnate. To my astonishment, the creature spoke, a voice eerily reminiscent of my grandmother's, albeit distorted and tinged with annoyance. "Come with me, boy," it intoned, the words chilling my very soul. The voice bore a semblance to my grandmother's familiar call, but a malevolent twist distorted its familiarity. I resisted the urge to react, steadfast in my determination not to be ensnared by its manipulation. The creature's frustration became palpable, and it lowered its hand, its focus intensifying as it leaned closer, its putrid odor assaulting my senses. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst, my fate hanging in the balance. Just then, a presence emerged from the basement, footsteps signaling an approach toward the stairs. The creature heard it too, its head swiveling toward the sound, the piercing gaze that had been fixed upon me now shifting. In a matter of seconds, the entity had retreated, vanishing into the trees as swiftly as it had appeared. I sprang into action, rushing to the door to shut it before rejoining my grandmother and mom in the kitchen. Their presence was an unwitting distraction, their words of concern covering up my frantic cleaning of a minuscule bloodstain that had been left behind. The next morning, we departed that wretched place, my relief palpable as we drove away from the nightmare that had engulfed us. Carissa and her family faded from our lives, a necessary distance sought to heal the wounds of tragedy. Weeks later, they too would vanish under mysterious circumstances, adding an eerie layer to the already horrifying narrative. These events remain etched in my memory, a terrifying testament to the unknown horrors that can lie hidden beneath the veneer of the mundane. The relentless grip of fear and the chilling encounter with a malevolent force forever haunt my recollections of that fateful weekend. Until this very day, the origin of that dreadful entity in my wife's family remains shrouded in uncertainty. Maura, my mother-in-law, stands out among the spectrum of psycho bitch mothers-in-law that exist. This isn't me being harsh, it's an undeniable truth. Even her own children openly acknowledge it, with my wife Amy, her eldest daughter, being the most vocal in this regard. In fact, Amy is not just vocal but steadfast in standing up to her. When our daughter Lily was born, and Maura's obsession with the baby teetered on the edge of dangerous, Amy laid down a clear boundary. Maura could only see Lily during family gatherings, and she was not allowed to hold her. This declaration shook Maura, forcing her to abide by the rules lest she face a restraining order. Still, her urge to smother a helpless creature persisted, so she decided to get herself a dog. She christened the unfortunate creature Banjo. I say unfortunate because Banjo's appearance wasn't exactly a charming one, and I would have felt sorry for him if his owner wasn't Maura. She had a knack for saddling things with names that matched her eccentricities. We officially met Banjo during Sunday dinner, an enduring yet unfortunate tradition in the family that we had grown to tolerate, despite its usual combination of tasteless food and erupting arguments. On that particular evening, Maura greeted us at the front door, her heavily powdered face adorned with an unsettling grin that sent shivers down my spine. Her ruby-red lips stretched so wide that every tooth seemed visible, and an eerie feeling took root in my stomach. In my experience, such a grin from Maura was a harbinger of disaster. She greeted us with an overly excited tremor in her voice. "Oh, how wonderful to see you. You can finally meet Banjo." Guiding us into the house, she rambled on about Banjo's cuteness, his impeccable behavior, and how he was an easier task to manage compared to her 3 human children. As we progressed further into the house, a foul odor began to infiltrate the air, akin to spoiled milk. Upon reaching the living room, Maura eagerly introduced us to Banjo, her delight bordering on mania. Sitting on a dull olive-green dog bed was, well, some sort of creature. It boasted an emaciated physique with ribs that protruded like the spikes on a stegosaurus. Its neck appeared disproportionately elongated, incapable of supporting its bulbous head, which was made to appear even larger by its round satellite-like ears. Its face was an abomination, reminiscent of E.T. the extraterrestrial but devoid of any of that iconic character's adorable charm. Patches of grayish-yellow fur were missing, revealing scabby patches of pink flesh beneath. Its tail, resembling that of a rat, wagged as it opened its mouth, revealing a grotesque purple tongue and human-like yellowish teeth. I was left agape, revolted by the sight before me. Amy voiced what we all were thinking. "What the hell is that thing?" Banjo blinked, his sunken eyes reflecting a vivid yellow in the dim light. The irises appeared as muddy brown pools. I could only stare in astonished disgust. Amy's declaration seemed to sum it up perfectly. "He's horrible, and he smells like rotting flesh. Keep that abomination away from my child." Maura laughed in an unsettlingly high-pitched tone, and the sound sent icy chills down my spine. "He's so well behaved. Much more than you kids ever were. I never knew being a parent could be so much fun until now. Amy's younger brother and sister Cameron and Ella, who were seated on the couch, seemed to slump at their mother's words. Ella muttered to herself, "Tell Amy about how you love that hideous little thing more than your own children." Maura brushed her daughter's comment aside. "You're just jealous, Ella. No animal could survive under your care." Ella growled in response, an eerie echo of the sound that Banjo replicated perfectly. Maura gasped as if she had just struck gold. "Oh, did you hear that? What a clever boy you are, Banjo." "Where's Dad?" Amy interjected. "I need to talk to him." "In the shed," Cameron mumbled. Amy passed Lily to me and stormed off to confront her father about allowing Maura to bring that creature into their home. Lily and I joined Ella and Cameron on the couch, observing Maura's adoration of Banjo, her voice reaching a feverish pitch that felt like an avalanche of needles on my spine. Banjo was now viciously tearing into a tattered chew toy, the nauseating sounds and vile smell intensifying. The scent seemed to linger on everything, suffusing the room and clinging to our clothes and hair. Lily grew fussy in my arms, reacting to the unsettling atmosphere. I was well aware that she too was repulsed by the sounds and odors. It was an experience that no one should be subjected to. Upon Amy's return, her face was set like stone, her caramel brown eyes almost black with anger. She seated herself next to me, accepting Lily from my arms and attempting to soothe her with gentle rocking. Her gaze, seething with hatred, was directed at Maura and Banjo. My unease intensified. While Amy was one of the kindest individuals I knew, her temperament, much like her mother's, could flare into an inferno of rage if provoked. It wasn't nearly as malicious as Maura's, but Amy had inherited her mother's capacity for spite when pushed too far. An hour passed, and we were summoned to the dining room for dinner. Maura, despite her culinary ineptitude, had cooked, adhering to her strict belief in traditional gender roles. Men worked, women cooked, cleaned, and tended to the children. The meal comprised an overcooked roast, green beans boiled into submission, and mashed potatoes that looked more like grayish lumps than anything appetizing. The salad ingredients appeared wilted, and the store-bought bread rolls were generously smeared with almost solid butter. It was a meal that had us exchanging glances, as if silently asking each other, "How do we endure this?" The sounds and stench from the living room were like a specter haunting the dinner table, further dampening any appetite. Lily was fed some mashed potatoes and green beans, which she made no secret of despising, contorting her face into exaggerated grimaces with each reluctant bite. However, she complied without making too much of a fuss. Maura, of course, dominated the conversation, steering it toward topics of her own preference. She engaged in gossip about neighbors, recounted stories about herself that we'd heard a million times, and pried into our personal lives. Her distracted demeanor was due to her frequent checks on Banjo. She couldn't resist discussing him either. "He talks, you know," she exclaimed. Amy scoffed. "Sure, Mom." "No, really," Maura insisted, her voice tinged with manic enthusiasm. Then an uncanny sound resonated from the living room, chilling my blood. "No, really?" The voice was twisted, an unnatural amalgamation that was unlike any human sound I'd heard before, yet inexplicably familiar. It seemed as if the entity producing the sound was struggling to mimic human speech, stringing together disjointed sounds rather than forming coherent words. We all fell into a stunned silence, petrified by the chilling echoes. The dining room felt like a vacuum, devoid of warmth, as we struggled to process the unfolding events. "Holy shit," Amy finally exclaimed. "Was that—" "Holy shit," echoed the voice once more. "Holy shit." And there, at the threshold of the dining room, stood Banjo. His movements were unsettlingly erratic, a disjointed dance that appeared involuntary, as if his limbs were being tugged by unseen strings. But most disturbingly, he was smiling, though smile wasn't quite the right word for it. "Get out of here," Amy hissed, pointing her knife at Banjo. "Go on, shoo! Go on, shoo!" Banjo's smile seemed to stretch even wider. "Oh my goodness," Maura squealed, her pitch reaching an ear-piercing octave that reduced Lily to tears. She jumped from her seat, causing her chair to clatter to the floor. "Oh my goodness, he's speaking." With Lily now crying in distress, Maura lifted Banjo and began showering him with affection, overwhelmed with pride. I felt a wave of revulsion wash over me as I watched the unsettling spectacle unfold. "Champagne is in order," Maura announced. "I'll run to the store. I'll be right back." Given Maura's tendency to elongate her absences, The words "I'll be right back" didn't hold the same promise as they would from others. She had a habit of stretching things out to seem longer than they truly were. Chances were she'd be gone for an hour, perhaps even longer. This gave us the window we needed. The responsibility of ridding our lives of Banjo fell to Cameron and me. Armed with a leash, we escorted him to the car, eventually banishing him to the back seat. The stench of sour milk lingered, a reminder of Banjo's presence. We drove away, leaving that nightmare behind. "We need to take him far away, somewhere Mora won't find him," Cameron proposed. "Somewhere Mora won't find him," Banjo repeated. Cameron tightened his grip on the steering wheel, accelerating. Our intention wasn't to harm Banjo. We simply wanted to separate ourselves from that disturbing creature. Cameron chose a provincial park not far from Mora's house as our destination. The darkness had settled in by then, and Banjo's eyes seemed to capture the moonlight, casting it back out like twin beacons. While dogs' eyes can glow in the dark, I had never seen a hue as vivid and eerie as Banjo's. It appeared almost synthetic, like neon lights. Cameron and I led Banjo to a small clearing within the woods. Cameron picked up a stick and threw it, saying, "Fetch, boy!" Releasing the leash, we watched as Banjo's movements became jerky and unnatural, akin to a puppet manipulated by invisible strings. Upon reaching the tree line, he halted, gazing back at us. In the dark, he transformed into a charcoal silhouette against the black backdrop. All that was discernible were the bright yellow dots of his eyes and his crescent-shaped teeth, both radiating like luminescent markers. "Fetch, boy," he echoed, then let out an eerie laugh. It's a sound that has yet to fade from my memory. And then he vanished. Cameron and I returned home, the scent of sour milk still haunting the vehicle. An hour later, Mora arrived, and we informed her that Banjo had fled. We had attempted to pursue him but lost track. "He could be anywhere," Cameron shrugged. Mora sent David, her husband, on a search mission while she coerced her daughters into assisting her with missing dog flyers. Over the next few weeks, these posters covered the neighborhood, but Banjo remained elusive. Mora's devastation was palpable, but after a month or so of mourning, she acquired another dog. This one, however, was a relatively normal beagle. Still quite a handful, yet lacking Banjo's putrid odor, unnatural movements, and attempts at speech. In the years that followed Banjo's release, reports emerged from the same park. These reports detailed attacks on other dogs and even humans, along with accounts of a bizarre creature attempting to mimic human speech. A friend of mine brought up the topic during a casual conversation, asking if I believed the stories. "Of course not," I replied. "It's likely just people's imaginations running wild because they're scared." "Maybe," my friend responded with a shrug, "but you never really know. There's so much we don't understand out there." And indeed, I was all too aware of the enigmatic and often chilling mysteries that our world conceals. So that's the saga of Banjo, my monster-in-law's dog. Next time, I'll share the tale of the incident where Mora attempted to abduct my daughter, convinced that Amy and I weren't feeding her the right formula. Last night marked a truly unsettling experience for me, as I found myself plunged into the eerie realm of sleep paralysis for the very first time. This bewildering occurrence was entirely new to me, although I must confess that my nights have been growing increasingly protracted lately. It's not uncommon for me to lose myself in the endless expanse of YouTube videos, occasionally drifting off while immersed in a Netflix series. As the evening sun faded into darkness, I found myself ensnared by a harrowing episode. Upon regaining consciousness, my surroundings were enshrouded in obscurity, and I felt an inexplicable sensation of being tethered to my bed. To intensify the unsettling atmosphere, a shadowy figure stood sentinel near my bedroom door. I was transfixed by its presence, a gaunt form adorned with cascading tresses of midnight black hair. Curiously, I felt immobilized, as if an unseen force bound me to my bed and stifled my capacity to vocalize my mounting trepidation. Eventually, a shroud of unconsciousness swept over me, mercifully ending this unnerving tableau. Morning's gentle embrace and a series of frantic Google searches provided a semblance of relief, allowing me to regain my composure. With the weight of that nocturnal encounter lingering, I proceeded to prepare myself for another mundane day of work. The clock's hands wound their way to 6 p.m., ushering me back into the confines of my dwelling. A desire for respite led me to indulge in a brief nap, only to be rudely awakened at 8 p.m. The eerie ambience of the early hours found me concluding a crime documentary. Seeking solace, I turned to lie supine, accompanied by the soft hum of my air circulation unit. An aura of tranquility enveloped me, rudely interrupted by an ominous knock emanating from the adjacent wall. Bewildered and on edge, I lay paralyzed by uncertainty, the silence resonating as loudly as the enigmatic knocks. A succession of rhythmic raps soon followed, prompting me to assume an upright position. In an abrupt twist, the quietude of the night was shattered by a forceful pounding against the very wall that separated me from the source of this disconcerting intrusion. My instinctual response was to distance myself from my bed, an action that astonishingly brought the mysterious cacophony to an abrupt halt. Gaining courage, I approached the wall, pressing an ear against its surface. My futile inquiry, "Is someone there?" was met with an eerie silence, a silence that carried the eerie weight of an abandoned neighboring residence. With mounting trepidation, I dared to utter another plea, "Hello?" only to be met with continued silence, a silence that reverberated with an unsettling absence of response. Relinquishing my investigation, I lay back down, my gaze fixed upon the enigmatic wall. As if surrendering to the inevitability of the night, I allowed my eyelids to flutter closed. Suddenly, an explosive trio of resonant bangs shattered the semblance of serenity. Incensed and emboldened by frustration, I retaliated by forcefully pounding the wall in return. The exchange of auditory aggression marked a bizarre competition, a showdown in which my weary mind had no desire to participate. As minutes stretched into an eerie eternity, my patience waned, and weariness prevailed. Driven by sheer determination, I flung my window open, intent on deciphering the enigma that lay beyond. Yet my view remained obstructed, thwarting my efforts to comprehend the source of my distress. Frustration and desperation mingled, culminating in a fervent outburst. "Who the heck is in there?" I gingerly advanced along the ledge, inching closer to the window, my eyes straining to penetrate the murkiness. The house's architecture unveiled a sheltered patio below, an observation that spurred me to stretch a leg onto the nearby shingled roof. A solitary street lamp cast a feeble glow, illuminating segments of the vacant chamber concealed within. Dust-laden and forsaken, the room exuded an air of desolation. Inexplicably, a presence materialized before the window, eliciting a visceral scream from my lips as my heart galloped in my chest. The figure before me, a pallid woman of slight build, bore an oval countenance accentuated by jet-black eyes and tresses that cascaded like midnight tendrils. My gaze remained ensnared by her chilling visage, my faculties ensnared by an inexplicable compulsion to gaze upon her. With a deliberate movement, she inclined her form, her expression devoid of emotion, her pitch-black eyes riveted upon my trembling form. A trio of forceful knocks against the window pane followed, each resonating through the stillness. A pang of terror compelled me to step back, my precarious position relinquished as gravity claimed me, propelling me towards the unforgiving pavement below. Pain flared in my ankles and soles as they absorbed the impact, each sensation a stark reminder of the surreal sequence that had unfolded. A cacophony of scuffling reached my ears, the pallid woman's inscrutable countenance appearing over the edge of the patio roof. Panic spurred me to action, propelling me to my feet as I scrambled for safety, my keys and phone tragically abandoned in my hasty retreat. The woman's movement defied all logic, her form contorting as she navigated the patio ceiling with the agility of a spider. In this surreal dance, she maintained an unbroken fixation upon my form, her unchanging visage locked in a haunting, unblinking gaze. Racing towards the rear entrance of my landlord's abode, I pounded upon their windows in a desperate bid to rouse them from their slumber. Yet the pallid specter persisted, her relentless pursuit unyielding. Employing the inhuman mannerisms of her peculiar crawl, she advanced on her palms and feet, her gaze unwavering, her intent inscrutable. My pleas roused my landlords, their eyes registering a blend of confusion and concern as my frantic account spilled forth. Urging them to summon the authorities, I cast apprehensive glances towards the window, finding only an absence where the enigmatic figure once stood. The memory of my own recklessness surged as I recalled leaving my window ajar, a breach that had invited the spectral menace into my realm. Resolute, I ascended to my room, determined to confront whatever remained within. With bated breath, I flung open the door, readiness coursing through my veins. Yet my room lay vacant, bathed in the soft glow of artificial light. Taking swift action, I secured the window, locking it with a sense of purpose. My determination persisted, spurring me to examine every nook and cranny, from the confines of my closet to beneath my bed. The kitchen became a beacon of safety as I illuminated the room in its entirety. My roommates were soon awakened, drawn into the vortex of my unsettling narrative. Together, we embarked on an exhaustive search, scouring every inch of our shared domain in an effort to lay bare the truth of the matter. And yet, despite our concerted efforts, no trace of the enigmatic woman materialized. The arrival of the authorities signaled a modicum of relief as I recounted my harrowing ordeal to the officers. Their investigation led them into the vacant house, a venture that yielded naught but the desolation of neglected rooms and the passage of time. The room adjoining mine held the tantalizing hint of an open window, a detail they dutifully corrected before emerging to pose further inquiries. My account drew them deeper into the enigma, prompting queries about my lifestyle choices, queries that I vehemently denied, my mind a whirlwind of vexation and frustration. As the police concluded their questioning and withdrew, I found myself encircled by the company of my roommates. Their anxious glances mirrored my own trepidation as we settled in, attempting to find solace amid the specter of uncertainty. The night's hours crept by, the sun's eventual ascent casting a feeble light that brought only temporary reprieve. Despite this facade of illumination, an unshakable awareness lingered. The specter remained concealed, poised to re-emerge at a moment's notice. In a bid to wrestle some semblance of control over my turmoil, I've chronicled this tale, striving to encapsulate the inexplicable and perhaps aid the authorities in their quest for answers. Yet, amid this endeavor, a solitary, haunting certainty prevails, the image of her countenance forever etched within my consciousness. Rest, it seems, will remain an elusive and distant companion,